Okay, so screen share tayo. Ah, screen 1. This is Blankos. Okay, so week 15 na tayo. So all about configuration, network service, and performing testing, documentation, and deployment procedures. Okay? So technically may mga part dito na na-review na natin, no? Pero it's part of the configuration. Okay? So let's go to the part of installation equipment devices, no? Not just the network but also syempre yung computer natin, no? Una yung computer, susunod yung network. Okay, let's go to the configuration. Okay? So to define, so ito yung ano natin, definition ng configuration. Of course, configuration is a system that is set up, no? Inaayos natin or assortment of components that make up the system. Kumbaga, na-assemble na natin. So once we assemble, isi-set up na po natin siya, 'di ba? Aayusin po natin yung settings niya, okay? I-install na natin siya, 'di ba? I-designate na natin siya is part of configuration. This can refer to either hardware or software or the combination of those. So now, so ano ba yung mga possible na pwede for configuration? Number one, the BIOS, which is the basic output system. As we mentioned through the past lesson, no, it referred the software stored in a small memory chip on the motherboard. Yung BIOS chip doon, meron yun sa motherboard. Ang tinatrabaho ng nating BIOS, syempre, pag nagbukas tayo ng computer, chine-check niya kung working. Okay, for example, yung keyboard, mouse, yung hard disk, no, which is naka-install yung operating system before siya mag-proceed doon sa mismong pag-open ng operating system. Usually, yung mga settings din ay nakasave din po sa BIOS through our CMOS. May CMOS battery tayo doon. Ayan, sabi nga dito, it's instruct the computer on how to perform the number of basic functions such as booting and keyboard control. Usually, ang BIOS, di ba, ginagamitan po natin ng keyboard yan. But technically today, iba na po kasi. UEFI na yung interface po natin. You can use yung mouse para ma-configure yung mga settings natin. No? At the same time, may BIOS pa rin naman. Pero syempre, mas bago yun. Compared to mga dating BIOS, keyboard, no? Usually through the use of keyboard, no, to identify the settings, configuring the settings. Okay? Yan, usually identify and configure the hardware in a computer. Yung hard drive, optical drive, floppy disk, CPU, memory, lahat po 'yon. Okay? Usually pag nagbubukas sa computer, no, in F1 'yon or escape. So next naman natin is ayan, so ito yung basic input-output. Of course, dyan nakasave yung mga, kahit yung date and time po ay pwede pong ma-modify. But of course, nasisave pa rin niya kaya di ba pagbukas natin ng computer nakasave because of our CMOS battery. No, naka-attach yun. Kasi once na tinanggal yon, so every time na magbubukas kayo, so always reset yung settings nyo at magiging ano po yan, magiging 12 o'clock AM. Okay? So BIOS is assessed and configured to the BIOS setup utility. Usually doon yun. Pag nag-F1 or escape, makikita po natin yung BIOS. But today, of course, UEFI na nga yan. You can use your mouse and may graphical interface. Hindi na po kayo mahirapan when it comes to configuration. Still, may BIOS pa rin naman. For all reasonable purposes, the BIOS itself, all available options in BIOS are configurable by the BIOS setup utility. So it is assessed in various ways depending on computer or motherboard make and the model. Okay? So sa UEFI ngayon kasi iba-iba na po itsura, no? Same pa rin naman ang mga settings. So ang nagkataon lang syempre depende po sa manufacturer. BIOS pa rin tayo. So access and configuration ng PC system is independent on any operating system because it is part of the motherboard hardware. Kaya siya may BIOS chip and of course configuration lang siya na setting. It doesn't matter if a computer is Windows 7 or Linux, Unix, and any operating system. no operating system at all BIOS function outside the OS environment, there's no way dependent. So ang BIOS hindi dependent sa operating system. Regardless kung ano OS mo, still ang motherboard will work out. Okay? So sa BIOS din, can also change the setup utility. So pag save ng ano niya and restarted the computer applies the changes of the BIOS. Usually pagka nagsisave tayo ng mga changes dun sa BIOS, it's recommended to restart kasi nga para mag-reflect yung mga changes. Okay? So it alters the way BIOS instruct the hardware to its function. The following list shows that you can do in most BIOS. So usually change the boot order, load BIOS set of defaults, remove the BIOS password, or create a BIOS password. Yan yung mga usually natin. Yan. Date and time. Ito floppy drive, wala na po yan ha. Hard drive, yung hard drive, CD, DVD, meron pa rin naman. Mga drive settings. Siyempre, yung sa hard disk kasama rin yun. No? Yan, yung mga amount of memory, boot apps, yan. Enable, disable the computer logo, no? Yung pag nagbukas tayo ng computer. Yan. Quick power on self-test, kasama yan. Okay? So, yan pa yung mga other BIOS system settings natin. Okay. So, now that you successfully installed the OS, you'll need to configure devices as video cards, network cards, sound cards, installing the devices. As we discussed, di ba, pag nag-assemble tayo ng computer, yung mga hardware. So ngayon, i-install na natin siya. Syempre, kasama na yung operating system. So if Windows recognizes the device, drivers will be installed automatically. In some cases, generic drivers are installed so that the devices will work properly. May mga ibang kasong ganon. So let's discuss about drivers. So once we configure the BIOS, of course, we will configure naman yung mga drivers we will install. So ano ba yung driver? Usually, technically, sa totoong buhay natin when it comes to driver, siya yung nagmamaneho, di ba? Para yung mga sakay niya ay mapadala niya saan man destination. So same as true with the computer, siya yung nagde-drive, nagmamaneho para mag-function yung kanyang yung ability niya, yung kanyang kumbaga for example, yung bus, di ba? Yung bus diretso yung gano'n. For example, graphics card, ang trabaho niya, syempre parang magmamaneho para ma-configure yung mga display sa computer. Gumanda yung performance ng display po ninyo. No, kahit magpag-games kayo, mag-edit kayo, yung trabaho niya. Okay? So it is a small software program that help operating system to use, gamitin, or drive the device. Kasi usually, ang mamaniobra tayo. No? Siyempre, end user tayo eh. Kumbaga, nandyan yung hardware device, i-install lang yung driver para kung ano man yung command natin. So, igagawin niya lang yung trabaho niya. O kaya gawin niya yung i-execute yung mga task po natin. Whenever the device doesn't work properly, as if the proper driver has been installed. Of course, usually kailangan natin malaman kung sino ba yung manufacturer. May manual ba yan? Ngayon po, napakadali na po dahil may internet tayo. Madali na lang na may mga reviews na tayo sa YouTube, may sa mga website, naka-display na rin po yung mga manuals kung paano ba siya gawin, yung mga drivers and installers para hindi na po mahirapan. Okay? Kasi dati sa CD lang yan. Okay? Of course, determine the manufacturer. If you don't know, yan. If you don't know the manufacturer of which installed, so you follow this part. Of course, if you are familiar with my computer or this PC na, Windows 11 na tayo eh. So you're going to the computer and is device manager. Okay, as you can see, this is a device manager where all the drivers were installed in this computer. Okay? So yan yung device manager. Of course. So ito, in the right they expand the category that want to configure. Okay? So for example, dito tayo. Yan. So makikita po natin. For example, ito na lang pili tayo ng isa. Okay, printers. So for example, itong ito nga, printers. Yan, smart. Yeah, for example, this one, okay, or imaging devices, yan. So, right-click ko lang yan. So, properties. Technically, makikita po natin dito yung status ng ating drivers. Okay? So, details. Okay? Yan. Yan yung mga device configuration, mga events na meron siya. Kung gusto natin mag-update, click lang natin yung update. Okay? So, technically, pagka-browse my computer for drivers, if for example, merong installer. Okay? Or, dito naman, magsa-search automatically. So, yung computer yung mismong bahala. Okay? Technically naman dyan, pwede rin dyan, or mag-install ka yung setup, no? Yung setup na application, yung .exe. Okay? So, ito, processors. Okay? Yan. So, technically, and may properties niyan. We will check it's working properly. Yan. Kung mag-a-update ng driver, you see the driver details. Yan, nandyan po lahat yan. Okay? So, balik tayo dito. Yan, yung mga properties. Yan, in general niya, no? Kung makikita natin. Yan. Sunod naman natin is yung how to update, of course, update the driver. To obtain the latest driver, use the following list of possible sources of the driver in order to which are presented. Okay, so of course, number one is if it's OEM. Yan. So, if the device was installed on your computer, manufacturer, contact the manufacturer to find out how to obtain, download, install the latest drivers. Usually, nasa ano naman yan, mga sa installers naman yan. May mga manuals naman yan. Ayan. So, wait lang, nawala yung camera. Yan. Okay. So, device manufacturer, of course, you have to contact the manufacturer. Usually, inquiry through email, customer service. Okay? Next naman, chipset manufacturer. Ito naman usually yung mga madadali, no? Meron naman sa websites. For example, video card po natin. Usually, video card may installer pa yan. Or i-search mo na lang sa internet, no? The same model, lahat yun, bibigyan ng driver, then you download it. At the same time, bukod kasi sa driver driver po ng graphics card, syempre yung GeForce, no? Yung GeForce experience ng Nvidia din na download din 'yon. Bakit? Syempre, nag-update ng software doon sa driver. Okay? And of course, other properties nun. Yan, sa display adapters, modem, syempre, kung ano po yung ginagamit natin. May mga website, for example, printer. Okay? Kung ang brand nun, Epson, of course, kung may CD ka, syempre, wala ka naman pagsasasakan ng CD. You can search in internet or the website of Epson. Okay? Yan. Installation CD of floppy disk. Wala na po floppy disk, CD na lang tayo. Or, again, sa website. Okay? Which is mas mapapadali po tayo. Okay? So, the-download mo lang, okay, kung ano yung model, no, kung ano yung version niya, and then download it, then you will configure para maano na siya, install sa device, sa laptop mo. Okay? So, kapag ka OEM, original equipment manufacturer, device manufacturer, or chipset, so you have to update the latest version. Yan. So yung usually OEM naman kasi ano yan, yung mga, for example, yung nabili mong device is, kumbaga may tied up with the operating system, yon. Okay? So, install the driver files that you download for the OEM, device manufacturer, chipset, depending how the driver is packaged to the manufacturer. Yan. Usually, yan, either naka-zip file, naka-ISO file, or pag dinownload mo na lang, naka.exe siya. Usually, yun yung mga modes pagka nagda-download ng driver or installer. So, technically, install lang naman natin yun. Okay? Next is, yan. So, driver with the setup or installation program. If the driver uses setup or installation, run the program to install the driver. So, for more information, see the documented contact of the manufacturer. Okay, usually naman ito naman sa device manager. So, ito na lang, papailiin ko na lang. So, technically, pwede naman din dito. For example, if you are going to add a device, so action, so pwede tayo mag-update ng driver, mag-uninstall, or mag-add ng driver. Technically, yan, pwede tayo mag-browse dyan. Okay? So, magbabrowse tayo dyan. Okay? So kung ano man yung file na yon, so i-install niya lang dyan. So that's the other way to install the driver. Okay? So yan yung configuration natin. Yan, baba ko na lang Yan. Kung for example modem, yan. So may mga properties tayo displayed in display device manager, no? So wala kasi ako sample na ano dito. So yan na lang tayo. So sa device manager po natin. Okay? So technically, yan lang naman yung mga ways on how to configure yung ating hardware devices. Ngayon, may papakita lang akong video. Siyempre, it's all about sa network naman. All about yung sa user. Okay? Wait lang. Okay, set up, configure, and manage user account. For example, yung mga personal account, no? Pwede ka mag-add ng user, which is, kumbaga, pwede kang maglagay ng mga controls kung ano yung pwede niya lang gawin doon sa user na yon. Okay? Wait lang. I know familiar na kayo sa ano na to, sa setup na to. Wait lang.
Hello again and welcome back to our course on Windows 10. Much earlier on in the course I mentioned that you can have multiple accounts on your device, and it may well be that early on you need to set up one or more other accounts, perhaps for other members of your family. So I'm going to cover in this section the basics of managing user accounts. First of all, I'm going to review some basic account settings. I'll then show you how to change account type from a local account to a Microsoft account or vice versa. We'll then talk about creating new accounts, and finally I'll show you how to delete user accounts from your Windows 10 device. Let's get started. Referring to the list of users at the bottom left of this screen, you can see that there are 3 users of this device, and each of them has some differences in their setup. What I'm going to look at in this section, the very basic features of the setup of each of these users. So first of all, I'm going to log in the normal way, and I'm going to have a look at my own setup and settings first. Having logged in as me in the usual way, to see my settings, I'm going to click on Start, and I'm going to go up to Settings. So click on Settings. I get the Windows Settings home screen, and one of the options there is Accounts. By default, I see my own settings, and you'll see there that I have a local account and I am an administrator. As an administrator, I can do a lot to manage this device. I can do things like create other users and even delete other users from the device. So generally speaking, you don't give the administrator privilege, as it's called, to all users of a device. And a very straightforward way of making sure that somebody doesn't do too much damage on your PC is to not let them be an administrator. Now notice just under there that it says sign in with a Microsoft account instead. If I wanted to switch to a Microsoft account, that's what I'd click to do it. And at the bottom of the screen are a list of options for getting a suitable picture. So I can use the camera, I can browse, or I could use one of the existing apps on the device, Camera or Gallery, and their libraries of photos to access a picture that I can use as an account picture. Now bear in mind that we're still looking at my details. If I look at email and app accounts, you'll see the accounts that I use on this device, and I don't actually use any on this device. Now that's quite an unusual situation for most users. The reason it's that way for me is because I use this device purely for demonstration and teaching purposes, and I don't use it for day-to-day correspondence and communication. So I'm certainly not going to put my real emails, calendar and contacts on this device. If I wanted to access a system at work or at school, I could use this option. And if I go right to the bottom option now, sync your settings, if I were using a Microsoft account, I could decide here whether I wanted to sync the settings with other devices on which I'm logged in with that Microsoft account. So for instance, I could sync the theme I was using, my Internet Explorer settings, passwords, language preferences, ease of access settings, and other Windows settings. As I mentioned much earlier on in the course, one of the advantages of using a Microsoft account is that you can sync those settings between multiple devices to which you're logged in using that Microsoft account. The last option that I want to show you is this one, Family and Other People. And this lists the other people that are able to use this device. Note that in this case all of mine are linked under other people. I don't have other family members using this device for fairly obvious security reasons. If I wanted to see my family here, I would sign in with a Microsoft account to do that. Now the two other people that are set up on this device are the two people whose names you saw on the login screen, Toby A and Sally. Toby A actually has a Microsoft account and Sally has a local account. And what I'm going to show you in just a moment is what's involved in changing from a local account to a Microsoft account and vice versa. First of all, I should point out that the only reason that I can see and manage these other accounts is because I'm an administrator on this device. If I were a standard user on this device, then I wouldn't be able to change settings for other users. Now there's one other page of settings, very important page, sign in options. And these are the sign in options for me. Starting at the top, if you've been away, when should Windows require you to sign in again? So let's suppose you're using the device at work and you go away for a little while, perhaps go to a meeting, you don't actually log out, you leave your device on. After a certain amount of time, depending on the settings, the device may go to sleep. If it's gone to sleep, do you need to enter your password again in order to get it out of sleep? You've got two options here. If you've been away, when should Windows require you to sign in again? When PC wakes up from sleep, or never? If you choose the never option, that means that if you've been away and the screensaver, power saver setting on the device has effectively put the machine to sleep, all you'll have to do is, for example, to move the mouse to wake it up again. You won't have to enter your password again. There are then a number of options for sign in. The one I've been using so far is the second one, the password option. And this is the button, the change button here, that lets you change your account password. One of the options that's available now on some devices is Windows Hello. And this uses some kind of biometric or associated method of letting you log in. So it may have fingerprint recognition, facial recognition, etc. If that's available on your device, it will tell you here, and you'll be able to find out, for instance, a device that you could plug into your PC that would enable you to do that. So there's a link there, see how it works and find compatible devices. The other two options are PIN and picture passwords, so you can log in with a PIN instead, or you can use a picture password. I'll demonstrate both of those to you later on the course. Now it's time to show you what's involved in changing an account from being a local account to a Microsoft account or vice versa. So what I'm going to do first is to switch user. I'm going to log in as Toby A, the other Toby A, the one with the Microsoft account, and show you a couple of things that are different and also how Toby would switch back to a local account again. I'm now logged in as the other Toby A, and a couple of things to point out here. One of them is that you can see on the taskbar here, one of the icons corresponds to the Microsoft Store. As I'm now logged in with a Microsoft account, that gives me access to the apps available via the Microsoft Store. More on that later. And if I click on the Start button here, you'll see that Toby A has a very different list of, for example, most used apps. And the arrangement of the tiles there is completely different from the arrangement of the tiles from the account we've been using so far. So let's let Toby A go into his settings.
Everyone loves spreadsheets. Actually, they don't. But check this out. Okay, Monday.com gets
There he is. One of the most notable things here is that Toby is not an administrator. He's what's called a standard user, and therefore he can't see settings for other people. He can, however, see his own settings. So email and app accounts. There is Toby's Microsoft account, toby.a@live.co.uk. That is a dummy account, by the way, so any email received on that account is deleted automatically. And one of the other points of note here, if I look at the sign in options, is that Toby actually signs in with a PIN, and you can see here the option to change or remove his PIN. And if I click on sync your settings, you can see that Toby's settings are all synced based on his Microsoft account, apart from passwords. So let's go back to his main settings here. Now there are one or two important settings here. One of them is manage my Microsoft account, which lets Toby log in to Microsoft to manage his Microsoft account in the usual way. Also, if you're using a Microsoft account on a Windows 10 PC, you will have to go through a verification process. So if it says verify here, as it does in this case, it will be necessary to go through and verify that identity on this device. But if he wants to switch to using a local account, he would say sign in with a local account instead. So first of all, he needs to verify that he really is who he says he is by putting in the password to his Microsoft account. And now what happens is Toby has the opportunity to set up his local account. A username is suggested. Bear in mind that there's already a local account, Toby A, the one that I use normally. So the suggestion here is Toby A2. So let's stick with that suggested username. Let's put in a password. Password hint. That's a sort of coded hint for me. Click on next. So once he's signed out and finished, he will be logging in next time with his local account. I'm going to click on sign out and finish, and then I'm going to log back in as the new identity of the second Toby A, and then we're going to switch him back to using his Microsoft account again. So I've now logged back in using the local account. Let's go into settings. So Toby A2, local account, sign in with a Microsoft account instead. Click on that link. So all I need to do now is to put in the details of Toby's Microsoft account, the username and the password. If you want to switch somebody from a local account to a Microsoft account and they don't have a Microsoft account yet, there is an option here to create one. So let me just put Toby's details in and click on sign in. Enter the current Windows password. Now depending on your device and whether it's capable of using Windows Hello, you can use that or enter PIN. Put Toby's PIN in. And there we are. Toby is back to having a Microsoft account again. So I've just got a couple of other things to show you now. I'm going to log back in as myself and I'm going to show you two other things. One of them is how to create a new user and one of them is how to remove a user. So I'm logged back in as me. I'm an administrator, so I can add users to this device. Go to family and other people. I'm going to say add someone else to this PC. I have a number of options when I do this. One of the options is to specify the person's email address or phone number. Now the email address may be a Microsoft account email address. It might be some other email address. On this occasion, what I'm going to do is to assume a worst case scenario and say I don't have this person's sign-in information. I'm going to add a user called John D, but I don't even know what his email address is. Somebody's going to use this PC. I want John to be able to set up all of his own information. I'm going to set him up with a local account, not a Microsoft account, and all I'm going to do is make him a user. If in fact what you want to do is set somebody up and you know their Microsoft account or you know their other email address or phone number, then obviously you'd fill in the appropriate boxes in this sequence. So on this occasion, I'm going to click on I don't have this person's sign-in information. So I might take the approach, well, I'll set up an email address for this user, John D. So what effect I'm saying here is I'm going to get John down the road of setting up a Microsoft account, and John will then be able to use his Microsoft account when he's using this PC. But on this occasion, I'm going to say add a user without a Microsoft account. In this situation, then all I'm going to do is put in John's username. I'm going to just put in the username John D. I'm going to enter a password, and once the account's set up, I'll tell John what his username and password are. He'll be able to log in and set up whatever other information he wants to set up. So click on next, and John D is now set up with a local account. Now in the next section, I'm going to set you an exercise, and you're actually going to complete that process of setting up a new user with a local account, and then you'll be able to go through the process of first logging in and then setting up any other information that you want to set up. That just leaves us with one thing to look at. In fact, there are two things to look at. Let's first of all look at the question of removing an account. If I click on Sally at the bottom here, two important options. One of the options is remove, and if I want to remove Sally's account, I just click on remove. Note the warning there, deleting this person's account will remove all their data from this PC. On this occasion, I'm going to cancel. The other thing that I can do is to change the account type. Now, this account type refers to the difference between a standard account and an administrator account. Sally, like all of the users except me, is a standard user. If I wanted to make Sally into an administrator, I'd select administrator there, click on OK, and Sally would become an administrator of this PC. That's it. We've covered the basics of user accounts in Windows 10. That's the end of this section. The next one is exercise 1. I'll see you then.
Hey everyone,
Okay, so yan yung video naman about doon sa pagke-create ng another user account. Ito naman yung sa OS natin, sa Windows 10 or Windows 11, if gagawa kayo ng isang create na user, no? Kasi meron tayong administrator, meron tayong isa. But of course, it is optional syempre. Pero kung marami talagang gumagamit, no, and may mga personal preferences, it can be. No, but of course, ang factor lang natin, syempre, kailangan mataas lang yung storage natin para at least para maano natin yung function when it comes to manage user account natin sa Windows. Okay? So, yon, dalawa yung naging lecture natin doon. So, configuration ng computer, ng device, and of course, the managed user account. Okay? So, sino pa may questions?
Ano po, sir?